Hello, hello, all you lovely people. Professor Gray here with our final module on the relationship between God and morality. But this is also the last module for unit number 2. So you know what that means. There is going to be a unit exam coming out this week if it hasn't been posted already. But I'll post a separate video about that when we get there. So more on that later. Right now, though, let's do this module on the theory of natural law or the tradition of natural law, or, well, we're going to see lots of cool stuff. So now in our discussion, so again, this unit number 2, we're talking about on what is morality grounded. This kind of last half of that unit, we've been focusing on what ways might morality be grounded upon religion. And so we've talked a lot about the relationship between religion and morality. We mainly so far, the focus has been on divine command theory. Recall, divine command theory is just the idea that morality is based upon the commands of God. So moral rightness and moral wrongness, derives from the commands of God. And we've talked a lot also about how Euthyphro's dilemma really does challenge divine command theory, where either we end up with God being either, God's goodness, I should say, and morality being arbitrary, meaningless, and irrational, or we get God bounded by a standard outside of herself, and so God is not omnipotent under that. So either way, we end up with options that a religious believer might not be thrilled about, to say the least. We also saw then how Norman Kretzmann uses the idea of God's perfect goodness to try and resolve or find a way through or out of Euthyphro's dilemma. And this, begins with the idea that God is a perfect being. A perfect being is perfectly simple. A perfectly simple being is identical to all of their perfections, all their attributes. And so then God is identical to all her perfections. And then Euthyphro then looks at those two paths of Euthyphro's dilemma, and in each path he just replaces God with perfect goodness. And now we have two paths that are perfectly acceptable. There's no more problem here. And so Kretzmann says, both paths are true, and so he can just conclude by combining these two paths that an action is right if and only if it is commanded by perfect goodness. And of course, perfect goodness is God. And so this is the way that Kretzmann believes he has given us a true religious morality. But of course, I ended the unit with some problems and challenges this account may face, especially when it comes to will religious believers think of God in the way that Kretzmann needs them to think of God in order for this to work. Anyhow, so that's that. That's the past. So for this module, we're going to look at another approach to religion and morality, and this is the natural law tradition of morality and religion. And so now what I'm going to call, just to give it a name, natural law theology, to emphasize this religious aspect of natural law. So natural law theology, according to this, it says following nature, especially our rational human nature, is morally right. And going against nature, especially our rational human nature, is morally wrong. So natural law theology is just saying, that doing something natural is going to be where we're going to find morality in some sense of that, using our reason, presumably. But of course, what makes this a theology will be the idea of the role that God plays in all of this. And God setting up the natural order, God setting up the natural laws, and therefore acting against the natural order is acting against God. And hence, of course, that would be immoral and wrong. This is a pretty complex view, and so this module is going to have a few more videos, unfortunately, or maybe 4. I don't know. You'll know this by the end, I really hope. But we need quite a few perspectives to flesh this out because it is complicated. And to help do this, though, I will be continually coming back to Rachel's and Rachel's. I gave you a nice little quick reading from them that I think breaks natural theology into 3 parts, which helps a lot. And so what are these 3 parts of natural theology? So, okay, 1, 2, and 3. What are the 3 parts of natural law theology? Number 1, nature acts for a purpose that God has planned for it. That's number 1. 2, what is natural is morally right and good. Number 3, reason can come to understand the natural laws of morality. This last step about reason being able to understand the natural law, that's what makes natural law theology different from divine command theory. We don't need to consult God's commands to understand morality. God has given us reason, and we can use that then to understand how morality works and understand our human nature as rational beings accordingly. And this means that anyone, including atheists, can come to understand morality, can come to understand the natural law. It is available to anyone with reason, so everyone. So again, one last time, the 3 claims of natural law theology that we'll be talking a lot about: nature acts for a purpose, created or set by God. What is natural is morally good and right. And number 3, reason can come to understand these things, can come to understand the natural law. And this module is broken down into 2 big steps in order to understand this. So first, we focus on the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. A few of you may have heard of him. He lays the foundation for these 3 ideas. But I must emphasize, Aristotle was not a Christian. He is born a few hundred years before Christianity. So God plays no role in his account. So he'll lay out these 3 things, but there will be no mention of God in them. For Aristotle, nature is just being nature, even though it does act for a purpose. He sees no need for God in any of this. Now it's Thomas Aquinas. That's the second step. First step is Aristotle. And how does he get things started? The second step is Aquinas, who reads Aristotle. Aquinas loves Aristotle and loves these ideas. And so Aquinas baptizes Aristotle by adding God into this view. And so to get things started, I have a video from Professor Meyer from the University of Pennsylvania. Now, you might not know this, but this is kind of cool. She was Shakira's professor. Yeah, I'm talking Shakira. Shakira. Yeah. That Shakira. My wife's a Zumba instructor, so she really loves Shakira. Anyhow, Professor Meyer, or as you know her now as Shakira's professor, she's going to introduce you to Aristotle's doctrine of the 4 causes. Then I'll come back and add a few details connecting this doctrine to the tradition of natural law. So we'll get back to that in a moment. So off you go to Professor Meyer. As always, be sure to say hi to Susan for me, and I'll see you back here in a little bit.